On the Radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome to On the Radar, your weekly look at our weather world exclusively here on CBS 17 Plus. I'm Wes Hohenstein.
I am Rachel Duensing. We are so happy you're here with us for another episode, and we have a lot to talk about. The tropics are really starting to heat up. We're going to obviously spend some time talking about that. How do we get really great information with these tropical systems? How do we learn? How do the models get better? Big part of that, hurricane hunters. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about the hurricane hunters, but also we want to touch back again on some of that deadly and catastrophic flash flooding, not just here at home, but across the country. And we're going to sprinkle in some other things as well. As is this maybe the greatest August on record if you really like cooler conditions? I don't know. It's up for debate. We'll let you decide. But Wes, we want to go ahead and start out talking about the hurricane hunters.
Yeah, we're going to go back to school for this because there's a new study out of the State University of New York in Albany about the data that we get from the hurricane hunter aircraft. Men and women from the U.S. Air Force, from NOAA. We've got 3 different planes, several different varieties that we fly into the worst of the weather when a tropical system is over the ocean approaching land. The more data we can collect from the current storm, the better we can get at our forecast. All that data is fed to meteorologists all over the world, fed into computer models. That's the process. Well, the State University of New York at Albany studied a particular set of storms over about a 6-year period, and they determined that the information that is collected during those storms actually leads to better forecasts. They compared that to storms that did not have hurricane hunter data, and they found that the accuracy wasn't as good as when they collected. And, my first inclination after reading this study was, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, well, yeah, water's wet, like, of course, getting more data from these storms would help improve modeling and forecasting. I mean, that's what we'd think, right?
Right. I think this is important, though, because every once in a while, scientists need to prove what they're doing is working, and so we can continue to research and get funding and use this invaluable information to save lives. So they specifically focused on the G4 jet, and that's the one that flies above the storms, not into the eye, but it flies above it. It's the cool-looking one that if you win the lottery, that's the kind of one that you'd buy. Of course, the NOAA G4 has a bunch of radar data and computer data that your G4 after you win the lottery probably wouldn't have. But that's the one we're talking about. It's the cool-looking jet. And they specifically focused on the data collected from the G4, and they learned that storms are about 25% more accurate when they have data collected from the G storm. So that's pretty good. 25% more accurate with the data versus without the data. They studied storms from 2018 to 2022. All right, so it's recent storms. And they specifically talked about that G4 data and how that, we're not perfect in our accuracy. Remember that hurricane cone that we show all the time. Storms are centered in there only 2/3 of the time. Right. There's still 33% of the time where storms end up outside that cone. So it's not a perfect science, but 67% of the time we're accurate within that cone of uncertainty of where the center of the storm is going to be. But if we can be 25% more accurate because of the data that the hurricane hunter aircraft are collecting, that's pretty good. I mean, case closed for me.
Right, absolutely. And it really does make a lot of difference. And, when you talk to people, they're always like, well, why do they fly into hurricanes? It seems like it's just thrill seeking. And so, it is important to try and explain just, how important that data is. So there are, as you mentioned, a couple of different planes that fly into and around hurricanes. Those smaller ones, the G4s, of course, they're smaller, so you can't fly into the most powerful hurricanes. They're the ones that go up top. They can help drop things from below and get a lot of information. But also, we do have those bigger planes, the military style planes. Those also fly into the worst part of the hurricanes. They also drop dropsons and different things to collect that really valuable data. And it really is valuable, and it can help save lives. A couple of years ago, actually it was just last year, the hurricane hunters, both NOAA and from the United States Air Force, were just in Virginia. So myself, meteorologist Dave Downey, had a chance to go and look at the planes and look at the data that they're collecting and talk to some of the people who fly into these planes as well. I know you've had an opportunity to do that as well, but we want to revisit that, and especially because one of the officers in this plane that we're going to show you went to NC State. So there's a bit of a personal tie there, and it really does make a huge difference. So we want to show you one of those planes.
During hurricane season, we always talk about the importance of the data that hurricane hunters give meteorologists to keep all of you safe. So we want to take you inside this WC-130 aircraft.
This is the RWO pallet, the weather officer pallet where I sit. This is where all the magic happens, so to speak, as far as weather collection goes on our airplane.
This is Jeremy DeHart, NC State grad, but also weather officer for the Air Force Reserve's 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, which flies into hurricanes. The data they collect as they fly through some of the worst tropical storms and hurricanes helps keep everyone in the path of those storms safe.
We have a very important job, and so the data that we collect on the airplanes gets sent directly from the planes to the National Hurricane Center. And so within a couple minutes of us flying through a Category 3, 4, 5 storm, they are receiving the information in almost real time.
The data is gathered through instruments on the plane and through something dropped out of it.
These little tubes right here, these little cylinders, just a small canister, and we release these all the way from the flight level and they drop all the way down to the sea surface in a storm.
Those drop-sons send back valuable information back to the plane in about 5 minutes. From there, the National Hurricane Center uses that information to update weather models, forecasts, and update timely watches and warnings, all in an effort to keep you safe.
We don't just do this job for fun. I mean, there's a very important mission, and so listen to your local authorities, listen to your local emergency management teams when they're putting out those watches and warnings and those evacuation orders. What we do informs that process directly, and we want to do this because we're passionate about protecting life and property.
So let's look at some of the weather instruments that they use inside this Hurricane Hunter aircraft so they can keep all of you safe during hurricane season should a storm threaten. In Norfolk, Virginia, I'm meteorologist Rachel Duensing, CBS 17.
All right. Before we get to that, you were in the cockpit. Top 5 moment of your reporting career?
It was honestly pretty cool. I would say it would be the top moment of my career if it were flying into a hurricane. Like, I will be totally honest, that is on my bucket list. That is something I've wanted to do since I was in high school, which people, of course, think I'm crazy for wanting to be a part of that. But I've heard it's just such a really unique, really interesting experience to see how all of that work goes on behind the scenes. And this was the Air Force plane. There's nearly an identical situation going on with the NOAA planes as well. They have the tail radar, so they're getting some very similar information that the hurricane hunters are with the Air Force. But yeah, it's such a unique experience, and I would have loved that it would have been flying into a hurricane, like one that's not going to impact land, but it still would have been really cool. But it was really hot in there, and I know obviously it was just sitting on the tarmac, so there's no air going or anything like that, but you could probably tell I was sweating and red in the face. So kudos to the men and women who are in there all day long. And again, I know when it's up in the air, there's air conditioning, but they have a really important job to do, and it is incredibly important. But it also, we don't always think about it, it is kind of a dangerous job as well. I mean, you're taking a plane, yes, it's a military fortified aircraft, but you're flying it into something that can have more than 150 mile per hour winds. And there have been some really terrible flights over the years. One of them, it's considered the worst flight, the bumpiest flight in history, was Hurricane Hugo back in 1989. So they actually went through the eye wall. Remember, the eye wall is the worst part of the hurricane where the strongest winds are, more than 3,000 feet below where it was recommended. So they were like near the bottom of the storm, where it's the worst part of the storm. And because of that, the downdrafts from that hurricane were so strong, it pushed the plane down 880 feet and took out an engine. Yeah. I think there's a rumor floating around that there were a lot of people who flew on that Hugo flight in 89 and were like, nope, I'm done. I'm never doing this again.
I don't blame them.
Which I don't blame them either. When I talk about hurricane hunters at my school talks, the kids are always asking questions about it. And one of the questions that we do get asked is, have any hurricane hunter planes ever crashed? Unfortunately, the answer is yes, but it's been a very long time ago. The only Hurricane Hunter plane that crashed or was lost, technically they never recovered the plane or any of the people on board, sadly, but it was in 1955. It was Hurricane Janet, and again, it's the only one in the Atlantic Basin that has ever been lost, but they were last heard from when the plane was at 700 feet. So again, talking about how bad Hugo was, they were entering Janet at 700 feet. I mean, that's really, really low. That's the worst part of the storm. That's why they don't fly into that part of the hurricane. That's why they have drones and things that they put into that now, because it's not safe for people. So unfortunately, that one was deadly. And then in the 70s, I believe it was 1974, there's a typhoon closer to China that they were setting a plane into, and that plane was also lost as well. So at least two that we're aware of, and only one in the Atlantic. But again, it's been a long time. We've learned a lot since then, and even though it can be really rough, I mean, Ian most recently was a terrible flight. We all saw those videos. But
that was the video on social media that they were bouncing up and down inside.
And everything was coming out of the cabinets and everything. So they're bad, and yes, it is still dangerous, but it's not quite as dangerous as it was, all of those years ago when we were basically still in our hurricane hunting infancy, so to speak.
And those are C-130, Lockheed C-130s that were built as military planes to go fight in wars. They were going to get shot at with guns and missiles and bullets, and they decided that would be a good plane to reconfigure to use for science and fly into storms. It's already built for wars. You're going to battle essentially when you fly into a hurricane. Now, there's a plan, a long-term plan, where that G5 that I was talking about, the cool jet-looking one, they're going to replace that with a G550, so an upgraded version that's scheduled to enter into the Hurricane Hunter fleet in the coming years. We'll see with budgetary issues if that actually happens. But if you are more interested in learning more about the study I was just talking about, that is in a recent episode of Weather and Forecasting. Again, that was from the State University of New York at Albany. And we actually got to see kind of a different view of these hurricane hunters in motion last year with Hurricane Beryl. So it's one thing to see the video and have someone talk about it, but let's kind of actually show you the path of how these storms work when a hurricane hunter enters the hurricane. I got to break it down last year on the news, so check that out. This was a picture yesterday. There you can see the propeller looking out into the giant eye of the storm, these huge towering cumulus clouds and clear sky up to the north. Well, today, NOAA released an amazing image that gives us an even better idea of just what these hurricane hunters are doing in a storm. I know this is a little different map than what I'm used to showing you, but what we're looking at is obviously the satellite image from yesterday when it was a Cat 5, very well-defined eye. Here's the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. We're going to see an animation of it flying through the storm. We also have two other things out there gathering information. This little orange thing right there, that's a sail drone. We showed you video of that earlier in the day. That's a drone that's in the water, kind of like a small boat. And then we also have an airborne drone. So we have lots of things gathering information. The more information we can gather from a current standpoint, the better idea we have of where this thing is going to go. And a Cat 5 hurricane with 160-mile-an-hour winds, we want to know where it's going to go. For our friends in the Caribbean and Mexico, and of course here in the U.S. So I'm going to put the plane in motion and watch as it goes in motion. You're going to see these little icons pop up during its path. Those are drop sons. There's a little chute in the back of the plane with a parachute. It looks like a little missile, but it's got a lot of measuring devices on that drop son, on that little missile. And we drop them all over the place, in and around the eye and around the periphery of the storm. And all that information is fed back to the plane, and they disseminate it to meteorologists all over the world. They pump it into computer models so we have a better idea of where this storm's going to go. And they are still out there right now. The latest from the hurricane hunters. Look, there's one, two. There's a third one on the way. Again, a monster storm impacting millions of people. So we want to do the best job we can of gathering information. And the latest is a 140-mile-per-hour Cat 4 hurricane. Not going to impact us. We've got our own problems here in North Carolina. And that was from Hurricane Beryl last year. At the very end, you saw some temperatures in the 90s. We can't ignore this August we're living through and how cool it's been. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But it's just such a fascinating piece of technology and science and bravery with the Hurricane Hunter airplanes flying into the worst of the weather so we can have better forecasts.
Yeah, and they're out there for hours on end. Sometimes they're out there for days on end as well, away from their friends, their family, their loved ones. So we're definitely so appreciative of everything they do because, as you mentioned, it all goes back. The more data we can get, the better those forecasts will be and the safer we can all be if we can accurately represent and understand that data and pass it along to people. So very great stuff and obviously just really cool stuff to look at as
something
well.
we use every hurricane season. So as we go through the hurricane season, one of the other big stories developing this summer is floods. It seems like every week we are talking about floods, whether it's the historic deadly floods in Texas or floods in our own backyard. Unfortunately, it's been a popular conversation this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we come back, we're going to touch on the flooding and, yes, talk more about the tropics as well. And we alluded to it. Is this the greatest August ever? We'll leave that up to you, but we're going to talk about it after we take a quick break.
On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
And welcome back into On the Radar. I am Rachel Duensing, joined by Wes Hohenstein. Again, we talked a lot about hurricane hunters before the break, but there are other things going on that we have to talk about. And one of those, of course, being the devastating flash flooding that we've dealt with here in North Carolina, and so many have dealt with across the country as well.
Yep. Texas, unfortunately, the big story this summer when it comes to flash flooding, we had our own problems with Tropical Storm Chantal. The National Weather Service, through the end of July, has already issued more than 3,600 flash flood warnings, which is close to an average for the entire year. So if you're thinking to yourself, boy, we've had a lot of heavy rain, we have, unfortunately.
We have, and this graphic that we have here shows just a fraction of those flash flood warnings. These are only the warnings that have been issued since June 1st through the middle of August. So again, it's easy to see where there are some sort of hot spots, that sort of south central Texas where they had that devastating flooding in the beginning of July, but also across the middle portion of the country. I mean, there's been flash flooding that happened, across portions of Wisconsin, in Chicago, in the middle part of the country, basically. And you can also see there's been a lot in the Northeast as well as here in the Mid-Atlantic and across central North Carolina. So just a lot of flash flooding concerns over the past few weeks, but especially over the past few months as well.
Yeah, and summer is the time of year where we see the heaviest rain because a couple things. It's hot and it's humid. There's a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, and the jet stream slows down. So that river of air a couple miles up in the sky that's usually moving really fast across the country, it slows down in the summer. So the storms that move with it are also slow. So you have heavy rain-making storms, and you have a slow jet stream with slow-moving storms. It sits over one area for a long time, and we're seeing stuff like we saw in Texas and that video that you're seeing from Tropical Storm Chantal earlier this summer.
And a lot of moisture as well. Obviously, we know the summer is humid. That's kind of a staple of summer here in North Carolina, but with so much of that moisture just sitting in place, especially with this, it was Chantal, sort of tropical moisture, it really adds to the flooding potential, and it doesn't take much for, as Wes was mentioning, a slow-moving storm to really just sit in one area and just dump rain. And that's when you saw the road washing out. We've seen so many devastating images across the country with the flooding here over the past few weeks, the past month or so. And unfortunately, this is something we've seen increase over the past few decades as well, as our atmosphere holds more moisture because of our warming climate. And obviously, lately we haven't been all that hot. The past few days we've had temperatures in the 80s, but we've still had some flooding rains.
Very muggy.
Right, but it's all about the moisture. Warmer air tends to hold more moisture, and that can also be sort of the flip in the winter as well, where we have more moisture in the air, so if we get colder we can get more snowstorms. But in this instance, a lot of flooding, or more snow potential for when we have. But you know what I'm getting.
We just can't get cold enough for snow in the
Right,
winter.
right.
For central North Carolina, our two wettest months of the year on average, 100 and almost 50 years worth of data, July number 1, August number 2, both have about 5 inches on average per month. We've already started off August as the wettest August on record, the first 2 weeks. On the flip side, our 2 driest months of the year with about 2 inches of rain every month, November and October. So July, August, wettest, November, October, driest. And it's strange because those months are so close to each other. It's not like they're opposite ends. They're right there next to each other.
Yeah. Part of that probably has to do with some tropical moisture as well, in addition to just this is when we normally expect a decent amount of rain.
That's what Tropical Storm Chantal did.
Yeah. And it also goes back to impacts and not so much focusing on the storm. We'll get to more on tropics later, but we want to talk about, we've already mentioned it a little bit, August. We've said it a couple of times. Is this the greatest August ever? At least in recent history, Wes.
Yeah, if you ask my electric bill, because we have not had any temperatures in the 90s yet, it's been cooler, and it's so strange because June and July were the hottest July on record and the hottest June on record. And then you would think, well, this hot summer trend is going to continue into August, but just as the calendar turned, the temperatures turned, and we are now starting off, when you take the average temperatures, so highs and lows, you take our record books, which go all the way back to 1887, all right, and 2025 is right now the 3rd coolest start on record. But, I mean, look at the numbers, 73.2, 0.4, 0.7. So it's really, really close. But, again, I think the highlight of that is we haven't had any days in the 90s after having so many in June and July.
And people have been reaching out to us, have been reaching out to the weather team and saying it seems like it's either sweltering, miserable heat or cool and rainy, and there's just no in between.
Right.
And it does kind of feel like that, and in a way that has kind of happened. But yeah, it is, it's kind of a very odd pattern that we've been in. But yeah, it's just, very strange. But again, in recent history, this is probably one of the coolest Augusts we felt so far. But I don't know if it can take the title of best August on record. Wes.
Yeah, for that, with all apologies to Bryan Adams, the summer of 69. August 1969. I researched this a couple years ago. We were having like a really bad August, and I was like, all right, we need to find a bright spot in these hot August years. So in August 1969, we not only went through the first 2 weeks without any 90s, we went through the entire month without any 90s. I mean, look, triple check if you want, but can you imagine an entire month of August without any 90-degree temperatures? Keep in mind that the first week of the month, the average high is 90. The second week of the month, the average high is 89. So it's not like it gets really cold in August, but just an unusual month back in 1969.
Yeah, for sure. Apparently it's been so unusually that my camera has gone out of focus. Don't know when that happened. So apologies if that's been driving you crazy. I'm going to try and fix that at some point.
Either that or people are doing shots at home every time we say hurricane
Best August
or something.
ever,
Right.
or Hurricane Hunter. Yeah, something like
It's
that.
getting a little blurry.
Yeah, apologies about that. But anyway, as we sort of transition from this cooler August that we're currently living through, as well as this one that maybe some of you lived through, obviously it is hurricane season, and so we have to talk about that as well. We have had some sort of changes to the overall hurricane forecast, and the first one comes to us from NOAA. So the initial forecast that came out sort of mid to end of May called for an above average season, anywhere from 13 to 19 overall named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes. They just updated this a couple of weeks ago, back on August 7th, actually about a week ago, and they didn't really change it all that much. Technically, they did decrease the overall storms and overall hurricanes by about 1, but they're still expecting an above active season. And it was similar for Colorado State. Colorado State does a lot of really great research in terms of tropical forecasting, and theirs is the same thing, where they initially forecast 17 named storms, and then in their July and August update, it was down to 16. Not a big change, but a change nonetheless, but it's still showing that more active than average season.
Yeah, and those numbers already include the 4 named storms we've already had.
Correct.
So that's not 16 more, it's, I guess, 12 more with the 4 that we've already had.
Yeah, correct. And we know things are going to continue to get active. Things are already active right now. And this is an area that we tend to watch this time of year because the West African monsoon is a huge player in tropical activity. And so what you're seeing highlighted here is the next 2 weeks. So August 20th to August 26th is where we could start to see more tropical development, mainly from those waves coming off of West Africa, tapping into the really, really warm waters of the Atlantic, and then becoming possibly those tropical systems that we then have to track going forward.
And this is what's happened with Aaron. Aaron came off the coast of Africa as a good old-fashioned thunderstorm, a cluster of thunderstorms. As it moves across the warm waters of the Atlantic, that's where it gathers energy and strengthens. And so those type of storms coming off the coast of Africa is what we'll watch in the coming weeks and months. Of course, we are smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic hurricane season, which started on June 1st, ends on November 30th. Of course, we usually don't get a lot in November. We don't get a lot in June. The peak months for the East Coast and the Atlantic Ocean are August, September, and the first couple weeks of October. We are right there at the beginning of what is the peak of the season, which has its climatological peak on September 10th. If you think back in your mind, all the bad storms that have hit North Carolina over the years, when have they happened? A lot of them happen in September, and that is one of the reasons why the peak is in the beginning of September.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, we're going to end it as we always do. Oh my gosh, that camera is so out of focus. I'm so sorry. So we're not going to be on this for very long.
Up.
We're going to end it as we always do with our favorite segment, Super Sunset. So go ahead and Wes, take it away.
Every night at 11, as you know, I ask our viewers to send us their best pictures of super sunset or super sunrise images. And we'll start with Bob down in Lake Oman in Moore County. Beautiful shot from back in June. Let's go down the road to Whispering Pines. This is from Tom. This may look a little strange because there's a Christmas tree on his dock. Every once in a while, I let an old one through. But that's a great shot from Tom down in Whispering Pines. Let's go up to St. Mary, Montana. John was recently visiting Glacier National Park in Montana and has this super sunset. We'll come back home to Oak Island. Back in June, one of our great viewer photographers, Scott, was at Oak Island and captured that super sunset. And we'll finish just up the road from us here in Wake County. This is Wake Forest. Jay, just out his back door, capture that beautiful shot. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. You walk out your front or back door and you got a super sunset or super sunrise. Sometimes you have to go halfway around the country or the world, but we accept any and all super sunsets. If you have one, drop me an email to sendit@cbs17.com. Not only do I show them here on CBS 17 Plus on the radar, but I show them every night on the mothership CBS 17 at 11 o'clock. Good group of pictures.
Yeah.
Usually in the summer we get some good ones because people are traveling more.
Mm-hmm.
People are up later. Yep. We also have some funkier stuff in our atmosphere that makes prettier colors. So sunsets in the summer are usually better, and that was proved tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And again, we always want to see them, and we also want to hear what you want on our radar that we can talk about. So send those ideas on to us as well. And thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us here. For Wes Hohenstein, I'm Rachel Duensing. We hope you have a fantastic day.